Greetings, game historians, and welcome to Lord of Lore, where we break down the lore and history of our favorite video games and fantasies. And today, we're returning to the world of Amalur to discuss something that my channel has been waiting a long time for, and that's to break down the lore of the new content, Fatesworn. As those of you who have played the game and watched the community may know, the Fatesworn DLC is released with lots of new content, new lore to explore, and a wide variety of reactions and expectations. Some, however, have raised several concerns about whether or not the game has changed the lore of the Amalur we have all grown to love. In today's video, we're going to see what effect Fatesworn really had on Amalur and its lore. Also of note, we're going to focus entirely on the main campaign. Lore from side quests and faction quests will be for another day. Now fair warning, there are spoilers ahead. Let's discuss. Okay, so first of all, I've seen a lot of lore complaints. Why are the Fate Weavers still around? Wait, Agarth fought for control of the Fate Weavers? Aelin Shear never fought with Agarth before. Hold on, did you say Fate is coming back? Okay, so there are definitely some issues with the lore that we need to discuss. Let me go ahead and say it. I don't think the lore has been nearly as tampered with as people are saying, but that does not mean there haven't been some concerning points. Let's start with the Fate Weavers. Skald mentions that Agarth tried to fight with her over the control of the Fate Weavers, which would be odd considering they had been disbanded and Agarth always refused any kind of leadership role. However, I think it meant more that Skald was trying to keep them together, while the drunken, currently depressed Agarth was the one encouraging the Fate Weavers' disbandment. As for Aelin Shear, the epilogue makes it quite clear that her order is still completely secret, and I took it that Aelin Shear once worked alongside the Fate Weavers rather than being a part of them. What both of these issues share in common is that only Skald mentions anything about Agarth fighting for the Order or working alongside Aelin Shear. Honestly, even though it may seem like a bit of a cop-out, I think the easiest thing to do is just take what Skald says with a grain of salt. Skald's dialogue seems to be built more around adding shock value and motivation to Fatesworn's main campaign than actually building off the original lore. Not only does she say some stuff that would retcon some of the original story, but unless you spin the dialogue in the way I mentioned before, some of her dialogue outright contradicts in-game events, forcing us to choose who to believe. As for me, I'll follow the original game lore, as I think Skald was purposefully made to be derisive and conflicting. And now for some other minor lore issues. I thought the Matharans would have already faded away into the Almain, but it actually makes sense that a small pocket of them still try to hold on to what is left. In fact, this actually aids the lore, considering the fact that they are clearly not the same Matharans that they used to be, and the fact that their growing paganism away from Matharu is likely what led to the Almain's original pilgrimage. I will likely do another video exploring the new information about the Matharans at a later date. Another minor detail happens when you speak to one of the Rathir guards. He says Prismeer is starting to lose its power, which some fans might interpret as a retcon of how the Daklafar were going to be changed by it in the future. However, thanks to some old videos I found that I am sadly unable to share due to copyright reasons, the Prismeer used by Daklafar is in fact green in color, not red, showing that the Daklafar have still found their own ways to use it to their own advantage. Of course, Prismeer was obviously going to lose some of its power without Tirnoch, but it's almost guaranteed that the Daklafar would still find ways to use its dragon-touched power. Now for the big lore concern that's caused all the buzz, and rightfully so, and that is the restoration of Fate. Now, before people say that it might affect our beloved dreams of seeing Project Copernicus' story, let me put those issues to rest. Project Copernicus' story does not have a lot to do with Fate and Fae, like in Reckoning, and all in all, the original Reckoning was made to be an ultimately self-contained prequel. Whatever happens to Fate, the Great Cycle is still turning, and that is the main focus of Copernicus' story, so don't be afraid on that issue. However, what about Reckoning's story? The whole game was to free us from Fate, but now they just went back and repaired it? While I don't think it's entirely catastrophic in what it changes, it does have some interesting, rather vague potential. Reckoning was all about defying Fate, so what does repairing the Tapestry of Fate mean for the future? To answer this, I've done a lot of thinking and digging around, and I think that ultimately there are two ways in which the future could go. Remember, the Fateless One leaves Amalur so that the weave can be repaired. My first belief pertains to one line of dialogue where they might focus more on choosing fate rather than defying it. This would mean that though fate is operating, we still have the Fateless One given power to choose certain events of the world. This would mean that the weave has to do more with the grand scheme of the world, not the individual fates made by Tirnoch. In fact, This seems the most likely choice given previous lore, as the Great Cycle needs to continue to turn in order for the original story to continue. If this is the case, I believe THQ has repaired Fate so they can follow the story of Project Copernicus and the Great Cycle. However, the second option is entirely opposite of the former. If THQ does not plan to follow Project Copernicus, then the ending actually leaves it perfectly open for that. In the ending, the Fateless One simply leaves Amalur so Fate can be repaired, but he could just as easily come back. If THQ wants to focus on the Fateless One or the Reckoning story more than Project Copernicus, then this is the easiest way to continue that story. Fate is likely going to be broken again, so this ending makes it very easy for the Fateless One to simply come back and have another adventure. While that would be different, that in no way means it would be a bad sequel. Even if they focused on the Fateless One again, THQ's acquisition of Amalur's license and lore means we could still see tons of new things in the world of Amalur, and since they wouldn't be restricted by Reckoning's story, THQ could do something fresh and unexplored. In the end, it ultimately falls to the choice of THQ. But in the end, I think THQ decided to stick close to Reckoning's story. While we shape a lot of fate and the fate of the world, it's still very self-contained in what it does to the world of Amalur, and its status on whether fate is free or predestined is kind of vague, because the game simultaneously hints at both. It could possibly be concerning, but I think we as fans do need to realize this. Project Copernicus has been shelved for years, and we are not THQ. I don't think THQ really changed the lore as much as people feared, but even if they decide to entirely make up their own story, that is perfectly their right and something we need to accept. Now, I'm not being pessimistic to us fans. I too really want the Copernicus vision to come to light, and we as fans have a big part in Amalur's history. We've grown to love it and have spent plenty of time playing the game and looking into cancelled lore. But just because Fatesworn takes a weird stance on some lore, it doesn't mean all our lore research has been fruitless. By delving into the lore, we predicted that Telogris was indeed the god of chaos. By delving into the lore, we predicted that the Fatesworn were indeed the inheritors of Arathi magic. By delving into the lore, we predicted that the Arathi did indeed travel between the realms, which supports my dragon theory. Guys, Fatesworn may have done things differently than we expected, but it's still the Amalur story, and even if they take it in an unexpected direction, THQ still has access to all the notes and story from Kurt Schilling's original vision. You want to know the awesome part? The DLC story was actually written by writers from the original game. In my honest opinion, I believe Fate was not rewritten in contrast to the original DLC, but actually an unexpected continuation of it. I don't believe Fate is entirely back to total predestination, but rather the Fateless One left so that the Great Cycle will continue. Sure, the ending might be a bit vague for what it entails, but I think the mystery is half the fun. Fatesworn has some cool lore, and it is a great game in my opinion. I for one am still looking forward to Amalur's future, and for me, Amalur's future is right now. There are still so many quests and lore notes that I haven't discovered in Fatesworn, and I've waited too long to stop now. I can't wait to play and to learn more about Fatesworn. And that about does it for today's video. I've waited so long for Fatesworn, and though it isn't entirely what I expected, I still thoroughly enjoyed it. But what of the lore? Does the repairing of the weave take away the choice of individual mortals? Will THQ focus on the Copernicus story or make their own around the Fateless One? Leave your thoughts in the comment section below, and remember to drop a like and subscribe so my channel can grow. Feel free to comment what you would like to see next. New videos every week. God bless.